All right, we got to get through this because my camera battery is low. So we don't have a lot of time to spare. Maple wine, that's what we're doing today. I think maple syrup tastes amazing. Not that fake that goes by the name of pancake syrup, but good old-fashioned maple syrup straight from the tree. But, before we do anything, let's taste the maple syrup, because if we don't like the maple syrup now, there's no point at all in turning it into wine. Okay, I picked the right maple syrup. This is good. Now, how did we get to maple wine? Well, naturally, if you make wine from honey, maple syrup resembles honey. It's a sugary syrup type thing. So we're just using 100% maple syrup as our fermentable sugar today. But let me comment first on a preliminary distinction. Acerglyn, or acerglyn, if you're feeling a little sheepish, is maple mead. It is honey plus maple syrup fermented. A maple wine is 100% maple syrup. Okay, so we're not making acerglyn, we're making a full maple wine. Distinction number 2, there are 4 different types of maple syrup, okay? There is golden, amber, dark, and very dark. The difference between those 4 types refers to a difference in the strength of the maple flavor. And you get those 4 different types by extracting the sap from the maple tree at different points over the season in which the tree produces that sap. For this recipe, you have to buy the very dark kind, okay? That's the stuff that's usually reserved for cooking just because it's so strong in flavor. You use something like golden variety, it's just basically like adding sugar. You're not gonna get any maple flavors in the final product. So get the very dark kind. Funny little tidbit about that classification scheme of maple syrup. It used to be that there were 3 grade A varieties and 1 grade B being the very dark. But then they realized that was bad for marketing because people saw grade B and they were like, why would I get low quality maple syrup when I can get grade A? Third preliminary note that I know I said 2, here's the third one, is there are links to all of the items that I'm using today in the description below this video. So you can click the links. It's laid out all nice and systematically. Don't have to do any searching yourself. Just click the link and there it is. I think it will taste good, but often when I do these things, I think one thing and then something else completely different happens. So just roll with the punches with me and we will experiment and get through this and have fun. We'll have fun. Now on to the recipe, all right? You'll want to procure 1.3 gallons of spring water, okay? Get 1 1/3 gallons. Just buy 2-gallon jugs and then use 1 1/3 of the other. You understand? 5.5 pounds of very dark maple syrup. Shout out to our good pal Ricky.
It's not in your face anymore because it was back in January. It was punching me, and right now it's just kind of lightly pushing me just a little bit. So
your metaphors are masterful.
Oh, thank you.
Who went to New Hampshire and bought this for me. I then paid him. So the favor he did for me is pretty small, but like still thanks, Ricky, I guess. 3 grams of Lalvin QA23 yeast. Why that yeast? Well, basically I'm just following the lead of Doing the Most, who experimented with a few different yeasts and found that this one, because it tends to generate or bring out lots of terpenes, flavor compounds, it pairs really well with maple syrup to help preserve all of those good flavors. So we're not gonna try and reinvent the wheel. We are just going to use QA23. 3.8 grams of GoFirm and 4.4 total grams of Fermade O. Now, if you don't know what those last 2 compounds are, they are yeast nutrients, but fear not, I will explain it more later. But the relevant point here is that for measuring out like 3 grams of yeast or 4.4 grams of Fermade O, you need a grams scale. It's a very finely attuned small scale, often used in the weed consumption community. There's a link for that in the description, okay? In the description of this video. So click the links, buy the stuff. Now here's the recipe for you, written out. You can take a screenshot, you can pause the video and write it down, but it's here for your convenience. So I'm just gonna give it a sec. Okay, now on to the actual process of putting this all together. Step 1, sanitize. Okay, don't skip this preliminary step. You want to kill off any microorganisms or germies or other buggies. Okay, too much, I get it, I understand. Just sanitize your stuff. Number 2, prepare the yeast and yeast nutrient slurry that we will then add at the end. For this, you're gonna need a gram scale. okay? There's just no way to get around it. And what you'll be doing is getting a little jar, putting in just a smidgen of water, like, I don't know, 75 milliliters of water, and then add in 3 grams of yeast and 3.8 grams of GoFirm. The GoFirm is like this rehydrating agent. It gives your yeast a bunch of nutrients right at the beginning to help them build up their colony. And then the Ferment O, we actually add later. We add it one day after you put it together, and then day 2, 3, and 4 in like 4 different increments. And that's to give your yeast nitrogen while they are fermenting so that you have a nice healthy fermentation. So you have those 2 different agents, the Ferment O and the GoFirm. GoFirm is today as you put this together, okay? And then put a lid on, shake it, put that off to the side for at least 20 minutes. That is to allow the yeast to rehydrate. Then you're going to add 1 1/3 gallons of spring water to a brewing bucket. You will notice we are not using those nice glass carboys that are often used in home brewing videos on YouTube. I like them, I do, and I use them later on in the process, but I do not engage in primary fermentation in a carboy. So use a bucket, and you're going to add in the water, like I said, boom, that step's done. Then you're going to weigh out 5.5 pounds of maple syrup. Just pour in the maple syrup, stir it up. It stirs very quickly. It's not like honey. It doesn't take a lot of effort to get it to thoroughly mix. So just do that. And then it's going to fill up your 2-gallon bucket, not completely to the top. You'll still have about an inch of air, but this thing is full. But that's okay. I don't anticipate a lot of foam generated over the course of this fermentation, so you should be fine. The reason I think it takes so much maple syrup is that this stuff is really runny. It's got a lot of moisture, a lot of water in it. It's not nearly as sugar dense as honey, or obviously as like white table sugar. So you need a lot more of it to get the same corresponding amount of sugar, okay? Just basic physics. My target gravity was 1.1, but after adding 5.5 pounds through several different increments, I was only able to get to 1.096. That's fine. I'm just going to call it there. So add enough maple syrup to get to a starting gravity of 1.10. Now, if it's been at least 20 minutes, pour in that slurry of yeast, water, and nutrient. Pour it right in. If you didn't do that, you just have a bunch of watered down maple syrup, which is a big disappointment for everyone. So pour it in. Then fill your airlock halfway with sanitizer water. That is to allow all of the CO2 that's going to be generated by those yeast to escape through the airlock. But then at the same time, it prevents anything from getting in, like oxygen, like bugs, like bacteria. Well, I suppose bacteria might still find a way, but you're fine. It's to prevent most things from contaminating your brew. So then just pop that airlock into the little grommet on the lid, press the lid down, obviously, and then set it aside in a cool place. You don't technically need to be out of direct sunlight because it's an opaque container, but you don't want it to heat up. So I just put it under my desk. And the other thing, and this is just a tip for home brewing in general, is take notes. Take copious notes, okay? Be very detailed. Because while you may remember now exactly what you did, 2 years from now when you want to recreate it, you are not going to remember the details. And dare I say, the devil is in the details. So just take notes. You don't need a fancy book like I have. Just get a spiral-bound notebook. Write stuff out. It's easy. The first thing you can expect is to see activity in the airlock. As with any alcoholic fermentation, the yeast produce CO2 in addition to alcohol. So if you don't see any bubbling, it means either there's a big crack in your container or the lid's not on, or the yeast are dead and it's not working and you have to pitch more yeast. I have no idea how long this fermentation will take. We're about 3 days in on my end, and it's fermenting really strongly. There's a lot of CO2 bubbling out of it, so I would imagine that this is only going to take 2 weeks to reach secondary fermentation, to completely eat up all the sugar. But we'll see. Number 2, follow the specific nutrient protocol that I outlined earlier. You don't need to know all of the details or all of the reasons why mead makers and winemakers have started to use that protocol, but the point is that the GoFirm helps the fermentation initially when the yeast are building a colony, and then the Ferment O, added a little bit at a time over the actual fermentation, ensures the highest quality end product. So do as I said, okay? Do it. What I like to do is get a little jar, just like the one that we rehydrated the yeast in. I add just a smidgen of water, and then I add in that day's dose of Ferment O, and I shake it up. The problem is that Ferment O by itself kind of clumps up, so it doesn't dissolve itself evenly into your must, at least not right away. So I just like to circumvent the problem, shake it up, and then I pour that in. You do increase the volume of your wine just a little bit, but it's negligible. Thirdly, this I only realized now, 3 days in, is that there is some foam that gets generated, and it can get up into the airlock. If that happens, just pop the airlock out and rinse it out, clean it out, add more sanitizer water, and just put it right back in. No harm, no foul. That has happened to me multiple times on all sorts of different fermentations, and there's really no risk of infection. You're fine. And it's just kind of gross to deal with. But if you can get over that, then you can make maple wine. Alrighty, folks, so that concludes part 1 of this series. I've structured my videos basically along the lines of City Steading Brews. I've combined that essentially with how Doing the Most does it, which is like commentary based, while he recaps with video clips. Bring the best of both together into this way of doing it, I think is working out well. In part 2, I'll explain what to do, everything to do all the way up to bottling, okay? So be on the lookout for that one. We might add oak to this to kind of complement the maple flavors. We'll probably have to back sweeten with maple syrup, and we might add other spices. I don't know. We'll just see. We'll play it by ear. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video, and be on the lookout for part 2. In the meantime, though, have a wonderful day.